Hello and welcome to Walk the Talk, our version of a podcast where you walk if you want to, while we do the talking. So if you're up for it, plug in your earphones and listen while you take us for a walk. Use this time to move your body and nourish your mind. I'm Sarah Mayo, one of the co-founders and trainers at Point 3, and I will be hosting this episode of our Walk the Talk. The next in our series aimed at HR professionals, business leaders, and anyone who's interested in the mental health and well-being of people in the workplace. So on to today's conversation. All right, so hello and welcome to today's conversation. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Tyler Polius. Have I pronounced that correctly?
Yeah, perfect.
People partner at Kobalt Music. Tyler, would be great to hear from you in your own words, your own kind of introduction, share a little bit about who you are, your role, your experience, your perspective around the subject of mental health, well-being, and everything that we're going to talk about today and why it's important to you.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so I'm a people partner at Kobalt Music currently. So it's a music publishing label which has the aim of driving greater transparency within the music industry and working with creators and artists and making sure that everyone knows what kind of they're entitled to. And again, there's quite a big gap in terms of royalties that are kind of attributed and paid out. And a lot of the work that we do is trying to kind of close that gap. So it could be up to kind of like $1 billion dollars out there kind of unclaimed, and it's working with creators to, yeah, I guess make sure that is claimed. And yeah, the mental health uh, kind of subject interesting. So I studied psychology at uni. I really enjoyed it. I absolutely loved it. And I just kind of loved the study of people and understanding what makes people tick. I think I kind of realized I didn't want to kind of go down the clinical route, kind of become a therapist at that time. And I quite liked looking into the impact of, I guess, how you operate in your brain and your preferences at work. So that led me to my master's in kind of business psychology or occupational psychology. And I really enjoyed that, really enjoyed that. And at the time I was kind of thinking I'm enjoying this, but like what's next? I didn't really know how to kind of use it. And then I started looking at HR roles or people roles, and that felt where I could really use my interests and skills and the knowledge that I'd built up. And that's how I kind of got into it. And I've really loved it ever since. It's tricky at the best of times, but I think it's a very privileged position to be
Mm.
in. I think you have such an impact in terms of being able to advocate for people's mental health. And you're not in the role where you can kind of, fix everything, nor are you kind of qualified to, but it's really, yeah, I think it's a real position of privilege in that you have such a direct impact on so many people's lives and, yeah, I guess their working lives. And I think being able to kind of take a much more holistic approach of people are coming to work, work and life isn't separate. I think it's trying to break down those barriers and making sure that people feel like they kind of can bring themselves to work and they can share these kind of experiences that they're going through. I know when I've been in situations where that's been allowed, that's had such a profound
Mm.
positive impact on my mental health. And in situations where it's not been allowed, it's been, yeah, really tricky to kind of navigate. So I think working a lot with kind of leaders and businesses to make sure that we can create a situation and a business where that is a lot more kind of the focus, I guess, and that leaders are a lot more understanding and businesses are a lot more understanding that people are going to go through things. It's, how we support them through them makes such a difference.
Oh gosh, so true, and lots there, Tyler. I love how you've said you see your role as such a privilege, and I think that's kind of beautiful, and that comes really across in the way that you talk, but also I know the way that you care about your people, having kind of known you for a number of years now, and we'll dig into it a little bit, but I guess that also comes with a bit of a watch out, doesn't it? Because to maintain suitable boundaries, and I would love to ask you about that kind of further in, because it can be really hard if you are a very empathetic person to sort of manage your own mental health as well as looking after the well-being and of the people that you look after. So yeah, I'd love to explore that a bit. But in terms of your experience, your personal experience, your professional experience, your education, it feels like the sweet spot where you are now. So really keen to kind of learn a little bit more from you. But let's warm up to start. So we've got some warm up questions before we really get into some of the bigger questions. So, as you know, we're a big fan of the one word exercise to describe how you're feeling in the moment. So, one word to describe how you're feeling right now.
Excited, I would say.
Lovely. Well, it's good to feel excited on a Monday morning as we're here on Blue Monday. What about your well-being non-negotiables, those things that you prioritize day to day, week to week to manage your stress, your well-being? We like to have three. Do you have any well-being non-negotiables, Tyler?
Yeah, I think for me, and especially over recent years, exercise has become a big one. So I usually will go to the gym before work every morning, which I guess exercise has its kind of mental health and well-being benefits anyway. But for me now, there's a huge kind of social aspect to it as well. I think kind of going to the same place at the same time, building a routine, has meant I've built a lot of kind of relationships and a bit of a community there as well. So it's such a nice way to kind of start my day to be able to go there and yeah, I guess see a lot of my friends before I kind of start the work day, and yeah, that's really special, and I really try not to forget that and take that for granted. Like, yeah, I feel like I've built such a close knit community, which has been, yeah, really nice, really nice, and helps get out of bed in the morning on these very grey mornings. Another one for me, I think, is reading and just trying to take time in the day to kind of sit and decompress. I think, especially before bed, I've been trying to get off my phone as much as I can because, yeah, I feel like my screen time was creeping up a bit. So I've tried to just take some steps to get that down, and I found that really helpful just for escapism, even just enjoyment. It's been really nice to just take some time before bed to try and wind down. I feel like it's really helped my sleep quality as well. Um, and lastly, I think journaling. I've got into that a bit more this year. I got a fountain pen for Christmas, so I actually really want to write. It's quite illegible, which may be good for, for a journal, but it's been really nice. It's just finding time at the end of the day again to reflect on the day, finding time at the start of the day. I try to do three things that I'm grateful for, either from the previous day or from that morning. And I think it just helps kind of shift my perspective quite a lot. And yeah, I think just getting as much out of my head as possible before the day ends has been crucial. I think in terms of kind of like mental maintenance as well. But it's interesting as well because you get to a point where I feel like yeah, everything's fine, everything's great, and I feel like then you kind of stop doing these things, and then
Mm.
it kind of creeps back up because you're like, oh, everything's fine, I don't need to journal. But I think it's trying to remember that it's good to just keep it going as a habit anyway, and it's yeah helpful just anyway.
Oh yeah, so true. I mean, there's we said three, but actually there's probably lots more than
Yeah.
three in there. You mentioned exercise, the social aspect, the community that you've built up there, which helps you being accountable. But again, we know how important it is to have that sort of support network. The reading, oh, I want to do more reading, so you're inspiring me. And the journaling, love that. Again, these are all science backed, aren't they? Ways. And it is true that, isn't it? That often when things are good, we deprioritize these things that actually, when they're beneficial, is when we're doing them consistently. Because that acts like an insurance policy, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, exactly. I think it's easy to forget that, but
Yeah. Wow, very inspiring. So moving from well-being non-negotiables to values, we talk a lot about values in our training, and keen to hear from you what your three values are, or what feels most important to you right now.
Yeah, right now I would say balance feels really important. Connection as well, as
Mm.
far I think kind of relating back to the previous point, and also patience. I think with the start of the new year, it can come with a lot of kind of pressure to feel like you need to be reinventing yourself and kind of becoming the best version of yourself. But I think yeah, for me, it's been important to take a bit of a step back and realize that it's okay if that's not quite the right time for that as well. But I feel like I've definitely felt that kind of pressure, and I've made loads of resolutions that I've forgotten about already. So I feel like it's it's always quite an interesting time for like at the start of the year because yeah, I think it's nice in terms of there's usually a period of reflection, but I think that doesn't always need to lead straight into action. I think it's okay to kind of sit with that for a little bit.
Well, I love that. Thanks for your honesty. And yes, before we pressed record, we talked a little bit about that, didn't we? About the pressure of a new year and setting goals, and actually we can be, really hard on ourselves. And fortunately, I think the narrative is moving a little bit away from that at the beginning of a new year, and people are talking more about values sort of guiding your behaviors as opposed to setting these really rigid, big, hairy, audacious goals. Um, because again, we know that all the science shows that we are likely to have given up on them already, and that we can be inspired by nature. Nature during the winter. You said reflection. Perhaps this is the time for reflection. Reflect on last year, reflect on the year ahead, and then to see spring as the time to start setting perhaps new goals for ourselves. But again, it's about knowing when something helps or hinders you, isn't it? And it's very personal. But I'm with you. Patience would be really relevant for me as well, I think. What about a saying or quote that inspires you?
Yeah, interesting. I think one that kind of springs to mind is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I think
Mm.
there's always, I guess it speaks to me in a way that there's always so much kind of going on at work, life, kind of personal commitments that it's okay sometimes to slow down and I guess think about what you really want and what you really need to be doing, rather than kind of rushing into things. Like I have ADHD, so the tendency to want to do everything now, is very high. So I think trying to kind of pull myself back from that and slow down and if I take a bit of time to plan things out and slow down a bit in that way, then it's probably going to be a bit less of a bumpy journey and a bit smoother rather than kind of rushing into everything because it feels great in the moment, which is, yeah, fun for a bit. But I think sometimes it's helpful to, yeah, I think take a step back and just reevaluate. So, yeah, I think that's one that I guess, yeah, maybe with the start of the year as well, that's kind of been quite poignant.
Thank you. And thank you also for sharing about your ADHD diagnosis. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that later if you're open to that.
Absolutely.
So I do want to talk about sort of leadership today. What does the word leadership or the behavior of leadership mean, or the responsibility mean to you?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me that comes to mind is around transparency and bravery. I think not shying away from those hard decisions and bringing people along on the journey. I think that's the thing that I think is most kind of pertinent for me in terms of I think being a human and acknowledging that and like not kind of operating in a vacuum that the decisions that you have aren't going to have an impact on people's lives and where you can bringing people along on that journey. I think the best leaders that I've kind of seen have always been very transparent and open and have a real skill in bringing people along in that journey. And I think I've always really respected that where I've seen it. Yeah, across the years. So in terms of the thing that sticks out most for me, I would say, yeah, it is that. And I guess with that also kind of sticking behind your decisions and explaining the reasons for it. I think that that goes such a long way. I think I don't know if it's I've done a bit of reading. I don't know if it's kind of a shift in the kind of new generation of workers now, but I feel like there's a lot more of a demand on leaders to kind of show these traits as well. And I think that employees and will expect a lot more from people now. I think that's actually a really good shift. I think that that will actually promote the right behaviors.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I've definitely seen that shift. If I think about when I started my career 35 years ago, maybe even longer. You said at the beginning in your introduction, you talked about how, you can't keep your work and your personal lives separate. But when I started work, it was very much um, the attitude that you leave your personal lives at the door and you come into work and you put on this sort of performance, this mask. And there was definitely, I mean, yes, I did have, if on reflection, some really good natural leaders who, did have that sort of transparent, authentic, human kind of approach. Um, but then I had the other type as well, and yeah, I'm really pleased to see this shift. It feels necessary, doesn't it? Because the world is so tricky out there, and it is hard. We talk about it being hard to human. It's really hard to be a human leader. And yes, some people are naturally good at it, but I think it takes intention, doesn't it?
Really
Um,
agree.
and it's not supposed to be easy, and it is a privilege and it is a responsibility. So yeah, we need to kind of step up to that and see it through that sort of lens. What about the best or worst bit of leadership advice you've ever received, or perhaps a leader that's inspired you and why?
Yeah, I think in terms of advice, I think one piece of advice that sticks out from my current manager is there's always a solution, and I think it sounds super simple, and I just think we're moving so quick, and I think things can feel incredibly serious, and sometimes they are right, and they need that kind of that seriousness behind it. But I think it's helpful to remember that when I think especially in kind of like a people or like HR kind of context, there is always a way and there is always a solution. I think it's very easy to kind of ruminate on things and kind of assume the worst is going to happen, but I think quite often there's always a way that we can figure something out that works for all parties. And I think it's very important to remember that. And I think a lot of the time we can get things that are kind of pretty last minute, and I can kind of send into a bit of
Mm,
like overdrive and shock and be like, but I think just taking that step back and remembering there always is a way to kind of work through things. And I think that for me, I think kind of seeing that attitude, like role models and that kind of behavior role models is really, yeah, inspiring. And it helps me realize that like it will be okay. And I think
mm.
it builds a lot on, I guess, kind of psychological safety, and that like we can figure it out, and that, yeah, there always will be a way to do what we need to do. So yeah, I think that is one piece I think that really sticks out for me, because I think, yeah, I have quite a tendency to kind of forget that. So it's helpful to kind of, yeah, ground me.
What I've really hear there is the we. It feels like your manager, reading between the lines, is very much like we can do it together. We can come up with a solution together, which makes me think again back to my sort of early career. And I mean, I'm sure you people still say this, like, don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. It's like the complete opposite of that, which is so lovely. Um, yeah. Well, props to your manager. What about a book or a podcast that we should all read or listen to?
Yeah, this is a really very tricky to pick one. I would
You can
say
have more than one if you like.
that's okay. I'll stick to the brief. I would say Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I don't
Mm,
know if you've read it, but I just
bits of
found it,
it.
yeah, I found it so interesting. Just it's like sleep is something that we do every night. Well, hopefully, every night. And I just feel like there was so, and obviously there's still so little that I know about it, but I just thought it really opened my eyes to a lot of, yeah, I guess the reasons why we're doing it, the impacts it can have, what the, I guess the prolonged impacts of poor sleep and low quality and low quantity sleep are. And it just really opened my eyes and helped me, I guess, realize how important rest is. And I guess that
Mm.
concept of, yeah, looking after yourself. And this is something we should probably be, yeah, investing in terms of, I guess, like time or, yeah, like knowledge, in terms of how to do it better. So, yeah, it's really, really interesting. I'd really recommend reading that because, yeah, it had such a, I read it a few years ago, but it still has it's still, I feel like it's one of those books that's always in like the back of my head when I'm like, yeah, when I'm, if I'm either feeling like I'm not getting enough sleep that week, or I guess it helps me kind of realize that it is important and it is something you do need to prioritize because, yeah, if
Mm.
you don't, then other things will kind of take place. And yeah, I guess the cumulative impact of that, yeah, it can be really tricky.
Yeah, and if I think about all the things, your well-being non-negotiables, think sleep helps set you up for all of those things. Well,
Yes,
they're interconnected, aren't they? Because
100%.
exercise, to get up and exercise in the morning, you need to have a really great night's sleep. But then to help set you up for a good night's sleep, exercise, but also, reading at night and journaling. So they are all interconnected, which is lovely. Yeah, I'm a big fan of sleep and go to bed at 9:30 every night.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I try to because yeah, I feel like it is really like the golden thread that kind of runs through everything. And yeah, I feel like I've been trying to prioritize it more and more. So yeah, I'm also in the early bedtime camp as well.
Early to bed, early to rise.
This is it.
All right, are you feeling warmed up, Tyler?
Been very warmed up.
Okay, good stuff. All right. So at point three, we, as you know, we're focused on building healthy and happy teams and individuals, ultimately with the goal of creating sort of high performing kind of workplace culture. Um, so sort of thinking about those things that can get in the way of high performance or teams being healthy and happy. What people related challenge do you feel is most pressing for you or for businesses right now?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing a lot of, I think, I guess broadly, is trying to, I think, especially in my role, trying to support people who are operating in a period where there's a lot of global and national uncertainty and disruption. I think it's especially an extra stressful time with so much going on externally that it can have such an impact on what people are doing at work and how they're feeling and what they're kind of processing. I feel like in some way, shape, or form, there's so much going on that there's a lot of people that are going to have an indirect or direct kind of relationship to these events. And that's really tricky to kind of for them to navigate and for them to come to work and do their best. So I think that is a lot of, I think, giving people, I guess, kind of leeway around that. And also news is I feel there's a lot of news around kind of restructures and redundancies that are happening quite a lot, which is really sad to see. And I think that's that though, like I feel like those kind of external factors are all playing such a part in how people are kind of turning up and showing up at work. So I think it's, yeah, a lot of it is making sure that people feel like they have the support that they need when there is kind of a lot of this stuff going on, because it is really tricky to navigate. So I think that is what kind of springs to mind when I think about what's most pressing right now. I guess it's not kind of specifically like a kind of like business kind of like issue per se, but I think it's
Hmm.
more that there's so much kind of going on right now in the world that can be hard to balance and kind of process for people.
Yeah, I think that certainly mirrors our experience, our conversations with organizations, and our kind of leadership survey as well. our latest one last year, change and uncertainty was the number one issue that people are contending with. And as you say, it's at a global level, at a societal level, at a political level, and let alone sort of at an organizational level. So that's a lot for people to contend with. So in the face of all that, what can organizations, you mentioned, it's important that they support people through that, but what can organizations practically do to help people cope and grow and develop through times of uncertainty, through times of change?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think kind of comes back to some of the warm-up questions that I was speaking around kind of transparency in terms of communicating when decisions are made, being as transparent as possible, because I feel like people are always kind of searching for answers and want to understand the decisions that are being made. And I think especially if people are hearing from I don't know, their network that there's a lot of kind of restructures going on in their area, or there's a lot of unfortunately kind of redundancies happening. I think that kind of really focuses people when they want to understand why certain decisions are being made in their organizations. So I think where businesses can, I think they should try to be as transparent as possible, and I guess also broadly kind of feeding this into all of their processes. So, for example, in terms of like career progression and like if there's any kind of calibration, what does that actually look like? Kind of giving people a bit of an eye into these decisions that feel like they're made behind kind of closed doors. I think the more that you can kind of open them and be like, this is how we're doing it, to make sure that we're doing it fairly, that can really have a really deep impact. And I think also training managers to support people and kind of, yeah, I guess spot signs if they feel like someone might be feeling a bit different to how they usually feel. I feel like managers play such an important role in the time in the kind of like lens of how people experience work. And I'm sure that we can all remember times where we've had a great manager and times where we've had not so great manager, and how that kind of made us feel and how we operate as a result. So I feel like making sure that managers are equipped to kind of handle these situations, and that they know when they need to kind of flag for support, and also supporting them through these, because we also don't want them to be kind of holding that burden and feeling like all the responsibilities on them, because it's not, and there's people there to support them as well. So yeah, I think that the kind of manager piece is a really important one, I guess, one in terms of ensuring that they feel equipped to support their people, and then also ensuring that they know kind of where to go if they're struggling as well, and they know how to kind of escalate things as well. But yeah, I feel like the impact that a manager can have is just like incredible for both, I guess, like better or for worse. So if we're not equipping them to be able to handle these kind of situations in the right way, I think we're kind of doing them a disservice, and also their teams a disservice. So I feel like that's a really, really important part to me.
Yeah, so I'm hearing sort of transparency, so in communication and training of managers to better support staff. And I suppose if we think about uncertainty and change and the emotion that, or the emotions that people experience when faced with change and uncertainty, ultimately it's fear, isn't it? It's they don't feel necessarily safe. So the more you can do to then bridge that gap to make people feel safe through that sort of transparent communication regularly, so that people understand, then that will help somewhat there. But again, the managers play such a crucial role in that, in supporting people to feel safe amidst uncertainty. So yes, that really does mirror everything that we see. I suppose that does lead on to kind of burnout, because we know, I mean, there are various different surveys that we can refer to, but we know that managers 1 and 2, let's say, have experienced burnout in the last year. And if managers are feeling that, then of course their people are likely to also be feeling that. Do you think that we are in a bit of a burnout sort of epidemic? And, what can organizations and people do to better support themselves and each other?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I think it's interesting. I feel like it, it can vary so much from kind of company to company, from industry to industry, because
Yeah.
I feel like right now there's probably quite a few kind of high growth industries potentially in like that kind of AI space, which
Mm,
is, I guess, quite exciting, but also I think can also lend itself to that kind of burnout because there's so much to do and so much space to kind of grow into and it's a very competitive kind of market. And then also I guess on the other end there's unfortunately businesses who kind of aren't seeing the growth that they need to. And then there's also that they're being kind of expected to do more with less. I think all these factors kind of play into the burnout thing. So yeah, it's interesting. I think that with so much kind of change and external factors kind
mm,
of ramping up in the world, I think the instance is probably, yeah, I think increasing. If we're not in kind of a burnout epidemic already, I wouldn't be surprised if we're kind of heading there, which is sad because I think people are just yeah, I think it's that uncertainty piece around people are just super unsure about kind of what's happening, what does the future hold. I think that AI is also having quite a
mm,
profound kind of impact, and there's a lot of kind of voices around it at the moment. I think you could read, three different articles, and one says it's going to take everyone's jobs, one says it's not going to take anyone's jobs, and one says it's going to create loads of jobs, and it's just really hard to kind of find out where I guess where your kind of role maybe kind of sits in that and what you do kind of sits in that. And that's just another kind of added pressure to, yeah, what is already quite a stressful kind of world at the moment. So I think in terms of organization, I think making sure that they're signposting the resources that are available to them. So whether that's kind of like employee assistance programs or kind of like private medical, if you're lucky enough to have it, but any kind of resource in that area. To give people just making sure they know that it's there and that it's easy accessible and that they know who to talk to if they want to kind of access it. I think also understanding kind of peaks and troughs of kind of like capacity and understanding that, sorry, we don't need to have everyone at 100% all the time. And that's not really feasible. And I think trying to, I guess, build in a bit more of a barrier against that. And I guess leaders being confident in kind of pushing back against kind of demands if they feel unrealistic, which is really tricky to do. But I think that in the long term will have such a kind of positive benefit. And then I think also there's a piece around, I guess, trying to foster an environment of kind of high psychological safety where we can, so kind of trying to make sure that managers are able to kind of build trust with their teams and that their teams feel kind of like they can operate in a way that, if they do try something new and it doesn't quite work, they know that that's okay, as long as they're learning from it and trying something new, and that if they are struggling, they know where to go and that they're able to kind of talk openly about it. I think that's kind of like an ideal situation and that people don't feel like they have to kind of hide and just kind of struggle along until they can't anymore.
mm,
And then I think from like what can people do, I would say pull on, I guess, all of the resources that you can, I guess, both from a work perspective, but also from a like a social network perspective, like who's around that you can kind of chat to. Is there anyone you kind of haven't spoken to in a while that might be helpful to just talk things out with? Just on that, yeah, I think that trying to maintain those relationships, if you can, go kind of such a long way in terms of just talking to people. It can feel, I feel like I know that sometimes if I'm not feeling great, the first thing I kind of want to do is withdraw and shut myself off to the world. But I know that it's better for me if I kind of keep those. If I've got any plans, I try and keep them in, or I try and call someone and just chat things through. I think it can really kind of lighten the load. And I think you realize that some other people are also kind of going through the same thing, and it can be really helpful to chat through that. I think also kind of exploring what makes you happy outside of work, what kind of re-energizes you, and trying to find that balance. For some people, it might be, you kind of get home from work and you sit down with a book and a cup of tea and read. For some people, it might be going for a run. For some people, it might be calling a friend. I think that just trying to find out what's best for re-energizing you and what kind of, I guess, refills your like, yeah, your happiness like jug, I guess, and what keeps that topped up, and trying to be intentional about scheduling time for it, because I feel like sometimes we take it for granted, in terms of, oh yeah, we'll get around to it, but then things always come up. So I think trying to be a bit more, yeah, intentional about that can be helpful.
Yeah, gosh, lots there. But yeah, that piece around sort of self-awareness you talked about, how you understand yourself and your tendencies. And so you you have your well-being non-negotiables, which you sort of are intentionally dial up when you can sort of see yourself perhaps withdrawing. So yes, having that sort of greater sense of self is really important. I think, you've mentioned kind of lots there, which sort of contributes to like a culture as well. Um, there are many risk factors, as we know at the moment, for burnout, many of which we've sort of talked about already, but including uncertainty and kind of workloads, etc. And those sort of things aren't necessarily going to go away. So what are the things that we can do to manage those better? Well, have great relationships at work, have a great relationship with your manager so that you can talk openly, transparently, as you said. Um, I think a lot of it does come down to the culture, that psychological safety. Where do you see sort of values coming into play there, and organizations' values? We've talked about personal values already, but what role do an organization's values play in supporting people through uncertainty, through burnout?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think for me, I think it's about kind of setting expectations from both sides, and that employees know what to expect from the business in terms of values, and that they also kind of know broadly how what kind of, yeah, what they should be adhering to. And I think that in terms of values, one thing I was thinking about is around. I think they're more of a two-way street than I think they initially seem, and I think organizations, whilst we can put out these values and say that people need to make sure that they're kind of behaving in this way, I think there's also an expectation that the business itself and its leaders are also kind of abiding by these. And I think that that's a really big way to kind of build trust, and to show how authentic the business is if they're also abiding by their values. So, for example, if it's if one of the values is to be transparent about decisions, and if they expect that from kind of people in the business but aren't kind of showing that back to people, it can create a bit of a disconnect, and people won't feel as aligned to that. Whereas if you're consistently being transparent about decisions that you're making, I think people build a lot more respect for that value, and it's a lot more kind of role modeled, and people are able to follow it much easier and model it much easier. So I think that in terms of how that links to well-being, I guess it feels like that should kind of drive the ideal behaviors from both sides, which I think should remove any kind of, I think that should help remove uncertainty of what's happening, and what the business is kind of doing. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think I was reflecting a lot on kind of like values and how they work, but I think that, yeah, it is a much more kind of like two-way process, and that I think that employees now will expect a lot more from businesses to also uphold them as well. Yeah.
And do you feel, or have you seen any good examples of businesses that, I don't know, build that perhaps into kind of performance reviews, for example? How do and can businesses kind of hold, everyone to account when it comes
Yeah, it's a
to
really good question. I think being open around, so for example, if there's like a calibration process, for example, I think being open around what the mechanics of that are, and I've seen it in businesses where that's gone down well, and people are understanding of like what the mechanics of that are, what can happen, and what the outcome can be. And also, I think businesses being as clear as possible as to what each kind of metric in a performance review means, and what the kind of weightings are. I think the less that you leave to kind of guesswork and for people to kind of make their own assumptions about the better. And I think that in these kind of processes, especially, there's going to be decisions that are made that people don't agree with. But I think the more kind of transparent and upfront you've been of like, this is kind of the process we've been through, and I think kind of holding the mirror back on yourself as an organization and saying, look, this is the kind of process we've been to, and XYZ people have kind of been through it as well. And I think it helps people advocate for that process if they can say, oh no, actually, like this is what it went through. So I think that that is a really key aspect and one thing that I've seen done well, across some of the organizations I've worked in or am working in. I think it builds a lot of respect as well for you to kind of hold your cards out and say, look, this is what's happening. I think people are quite drawn to that rather than it feeling like it kind of operates in this kind of black box of like it goes in and then comes out and it's like, oh, what's kind of happened in between.
Yeah, and you've mentioned a number of times psychological safety and how that helps to build trust and transparency. These all sort of feed into each other. Um, have any other sort of ideas of how psychological safety kind of works in an ideal situation, what it looks and feels like? Because it's
Yeah.
again, it's quite an easy thing to, yeah, okay, we want to have a psychologically safe
Yeah.
culture where everyone feels they can be themselves and can speak up. But again, I think we'll come to talk about inclusion in a minute, but I think it's not as easy as it sounds.
No, no, I agree. And I guess in terms of like, what is it like? I guess where I've seen that there's high psychological safety is when there's a lot of kind of honesty and authenticity. So I guess around, for example, let's say that I'm really not feeling great mentally and I feel like I need to take some time away. Um, if there's high psychological safety, then I would happily kind of have that conversation like that with my manager. However, if I feel like there's low kind of psychological safety, I might say, "Oh, I've got a cold, or I'm not feeling." Yeah, I might kind of give another reason for it, and I think it's a shame if and there are definitely cultures like that, and I completely understand why people might not want to share. But I think it's a shame when that kind of level of psychological safety isn't there because I think you can have a much more kind of I guess, richer conversation around what can be put in place to kind of help if you do have that safety. But yeah, I guess it kind of needs to be there first. And I've also, I guess, kind of challenging ideas of your manager or those senior to you and that being received well rather than kind of pushed away. I think, yeah, kind of seeing managers trust their team to know what they're doing and actively kind of seeking out their views as the experts is really positive to see. And I think another kind of facet where it shows up is if a mistake's made or if something kind of goes wrong, kind of being able to admit that. And I guess the level that you feel like you're able to admit that depends on the psychological safety. If you know that it's going to be met with, oh, that's okay, like we can figure it out, but, let's try and avoid it in the future versus if you feel like you're going to be, berated or, made to feel like really small for making a mistake, then I think you're kind of less likely to admit it. And I guess, underpinning all that, I think, is that trust and the relationships that people have with their manager and people in the business. And I think that it's really hard to, I guess, pin to one facet, but I think underpinning it always is that trust and I guess how well managers and employees can build relationships together and what systems are in place to kind of facilitate that versus what systems are in place that kind of negate that as well.
Yeah, because I often think, I mean, ultimately the opposite of psychological safety. If you don't have that, then you've got people operating in silos, hiding mistakes, they're not being open. And, that feels like the foundation for kind of loads of mistakes
Yeah,
for failure. So, again, I think we understand the theory of it, but actually in practice, it's really hard, isn't it,
really hard.
to be really open and honest because of that fear of being judged or fear of being misunderstood. But again, we're not going to be, if we're thinking about high performance, we're not going to be able to operate at our best if we're operating from a place of fear. So the more, and it's a paradox, isn't it? The more we can
Yeah.
open up and sort of push through any potential fear that we might be feeling, the more, yeah, we're likely to then get to that place of being able to thrive.
Yeah, and it's really tricky as well because you're also a lot of the time as managers kind of up against people's previous experiences and their kind of previous assumptions on what they've kind of had before, maybe at other companies or with different managers. So there's also sometimes kind of some like undoing work that you have to do as well, which is another kind of layer, which is really tricky.
Yeah, so the more open we can be to not knowing all the answers,
Yes. Yeah.
and it's okay not to know all the answers,
Yeah.
the more of a growth mindset that we can all have, then yeah, again, we're setting ourselves up for more success rather than failure. Um, Thinking about inclusion, and kind of where we are in the world today, how do you believe inclusive leadership can be kind of lived and breathed? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say I think the most important thing for me here is I think it links back to what you said just now and slightly unrelated, but about not knowing the answers. And I think for me it's approaching inclusion with curiosity, and accepting that you aren't going to know all the answers and that when it comes to people's experiences, they are going to be kind of the experts and the people you should be listening to. So I guess it's more, yeah, around actively listening, creating, I guess, opportunities where you can understand a bit more about someone's viewpoint or how they feel. And I think that, yeah, the kind of best leaders I've seen in this kind of inclusive space are asking more questions than they're talking, I guess, and they're asking, then they're seeking to understand rather than, dismissing an idea or something. They're more likely to kind of engage with it and ask questions around it and kind of put themselves out there and make themselves a bit vulnerable, even if it's not their kind of their kind of usual expertise. And I think that is a really powerful tool. I think it helps kind of bridge the gap between I guess kind of leaders and employees in the organization. And I think that, yeah, I think that's been something that's really stuck with me, is trying to approach things with curiosity and I think just being genuinely interested as well, and understanding that, I guess, operating with an understanding that different messages are going to be received different ways by different people, and it's how can you make sure that you're kind of catering across that group and you're not kind of whether purposefully or by accident kind of completely missing a whole nuance of a group because yeah, you haven't kind of considered them as well. And I guess that's when kind of resource groups and I guess things like that can kind of come in as well. And I think it's quite an iterative process. It's kind of changing all the time as to what it means and what it might mean in different contexts. So I think it's just making sure that that dialogue is open and that people feel like they can also give that feedback, because yeah, I feel like if you can't feel like you can pass on that feedback, but oh, actually, maybe the language is a bit off here, then that's also really tricky to navigate. So yeah.
Interesting what you've just said there, that it's an ever-changing space and we're learning more. And I think that brings with it uncertainty as well, because people are like, well, yeah, people find, work better with certainty and understanding, okay, what is it okay to say and what is it okay to ask? And I think that's where people get tripped up, and they have the very best of intentions, but
Yes.
actually paralysis might come in. They might actually not say something for fear of saying the wrong thing. And
Yeah.
actually, it's better to say something and even be a bit clumsy and awkward about it and sort of say, I don't really understand this, or I'd love to know more about it. I guess if the intention is there, um, and I think that's the area that we see people and managers in particular really struggling with. I mean, one organization before Christmas said to us, that a manager had even asked, is it okay to ask if my employee is happy? And I think we can sort of overthink things.
Yes, yeah.
But I suppose this is quite a good moment to ask you a little bit more about your diagnosis. You mentioned at the beginning that you have ADHD. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that means to you. Because again, from my understanding, is it's unique, and how it sort of manifests for you, and what does ideal support look like for you, and what can people perhaps learn and do differently around neurodiversity in general?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I was diagnosed about 3 years ago in November 2022. And it's interesting because at first it was relief. When I got diagnosed, I kind of felt like there was always something a bit off. I felt like I was operating very differently to the people around me. And yeah, I felt like eventually it felt like it was kind of catching me up. And then it was relief. But then I think after that, it was kind of like, oh, what's next now? Like what now? And like what does this mean? How do I operate now? And how does this change me? I've always had it, so I guess no, but now I know, so I guess yes. Kind of felt like there was like a missing piece of a puzzle that was kind of put into my life, and reflecting back on things, I'd be like, oh, that kind of explains that. But yeah, it was kind of scary. And it's been a bit of a journey since. So yeah, I've been in kind of like therapy a few times, just been really, really helpful. I found really helpful, actually. And I've started again recently, so that's been good. And also kind of recently started medication. I didn't want to start it when I first got diagnosed, but yeah, it's I've tried it recently and it's been really helpful. But again, it's kind of for everyone to make their own decision, and it's really, really personal. So I guess yeah, in terms of how it manifests for me, I think it's I saw there was a documentary, I think, on Channel 4 maybe, but I think they summed it up perfectly in that it feels like you're just constantly floundering through life. Yeah, I guess it's kind of like it feels like there's quite a constant state of kind of like overwhelm, and yeah, it's some days more manageable, some days less, but yeah, it's I think that's probably the best way to put it, unfortunately. And yeah, for you'll kind of go through phases of what I do of like things are really great and everything kind of seems to click, and then it feels like it kind of drops again. But I think in terms of what organizations can do to support, I think trying to educate themselves, and I guess give people the platform, I guess within these groups to kind of share like their experiences and what it means to them, I think goes a really long way. I think having seen that done at like previous organizations and current as well, that's been really powerful, just allowing people to kind of share their experience of like, this is kind of what it means to me. I think that it's much more relatable for people to learn for someone that they work with, as well, and kind of how it shows up. And one thing that's always really important for me, I guess, is that kind of like trust aspect and building trust with my managers, and making sure that I can kind of like, yeah, I guess be more authentic within myself, and that I don't have to kind of hide it. And if I'm having a particularly bad day, just being honest about it, rather than trying to kind of hide it, has been really important. But I think for me, I guess it's really difficult because there's so many different things that will work for different people. So I think kind of sharing resources around what potential adjustments could be put in place, and kind of being really upfront with that as a business goes a long way. Because I think sometimes there can be a bit of a reticence to ask, because you think, well, if I'm just being like needy, or, am I even allowed to do this? The answer is usually you are allowed to do this, and that's okay. But I think kind of like giving that permission to people, rather than having them ask for it, goes a really, really long way, in terms of feeling included, and I guess, yeah, kind of like belonging as well. And I guess the biggest like tip I could give, which is really easy to implement, is just setting agendas for meetings. I think it sounds really like trivial, but I think just knowing what's going to come up, get a much richer discussion if I know what's coming up, rather than if something's kind of sprung on me, because I think sometimes in the moment it can be difficult to kind of process things as a result of the ADHD. So I think just knowing what's going to come up is that's been really, really helpful. I think especially in like the role I'm in now, is really normal to share agendas and stuff, and it's been really easy to kind of like slip into that. So that I've just noticed such a difference with that.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, Tyler, and role modeling that sort of open, honest, transparent, and vulnerability, really. So really, really appreciate that. I think for sort of final question, I mentioned at the beginning sort of boundaries. How do you kind of maintain your own boundaries? Because yes, it's all very well having these well-being non-negotiables. I think you're pretty good at prioritizing them from what I've seen and heard today. But yeah, any other tips around how to maintain your personal boundaries so that, you know, particularly in a role like yours, where you are looking out for others, where compassion fatigue is probably quite prevalent. What advice do you have?
Well, yeah, mega prevalent. And it's something I think I've got better at, especially that compassion fatigue. I think it's something I've got better at. But I think for me, it's trying to just get things out of my head and ensuring that everything kind of has a place, whether that's things to do, things I need to remember, things I just need to get out of my brain. Because I think, I guess it comes back to that journaling piece, but I think the value of just writing things down and kind of processing them in that way has been, has done wonders in terms of, not feeling. Because I feel like if it's not on my head, I feel like my brain feels like I need to hold on to it. And I remember seeing an analogy in a book that I read that your brain is kind of like that rubbish drawer in your house that's full of like old chargers and like random batteries and and I felt like it was a really good way of summarizing it. It's like it can hold stuff, but like it's probably not the best place to put it. So maybe you need to take some stuff out and put it elsewhere. So I guess that's what I find really useful to remember when I'm holding on to stuff like, oh, actually, this just needs like a new place. But it is hard, and I do struggle a lot. But I think I try to do my best to try and like maintain those things.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, one thing that you say that you're committing to yourself today to do to stress less and smile more before the end of today.
I'm gonna go for a walk. I think even though it's grey and not very nice out there. I'm gonna go for a walk and just get outside. I feel like I always feel much better once I've had a bit of a refresh. Yeah. What about you?
Oh, good question. I walking, yes, I definitely want to go for a walk before the end of the day. Um, and having a really nice, nourishing meal as
Nice.
well. Yeah, take some time to cook
Yeah, nice.
because it's one of those things that I don't love doing or I don't love the idea of it, but then I feel so satisfied afterwards.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, I know what you mean. Once you start, it's actually really fun, but the idea of doing it is like,
Yeah. It's the same with all of the things that
yeah,
we know are good for
it's
us,
so
isn't
true.
it?
So
But you
true.
never regret a walk. You never
You don't.
regret a nice meal that you've made. So,
So,
yes, let's remember that. Oh, thank you so much, Tyler, for your time, your lovely energy, and your insight.
thank you for having me. I really, really, really appreciate it.
And thank you to our audience for tuning in today. Whatever your business challenge, we're here at Point 3 to support you and your people to stress less and smile more.